For 15 years, I ran. I ran from the ghosts of Afghanistan, from the constant ringing in my ears, and mostly from the impossible tales my grandfather used to whisper about our family's duty. My name is Mark Thorne, and I thought the loneliest job in New England, caretaker of the abandoned Granite Hollow Quarry, would finally bury those demons. It was a desolate landscape of sheer rock faces, flooded pits and rusting machinery, hidden deep in the quiet woods of coastal Maine. Perfect for a recluse like me, or so I thought. The quarry had been closed for over 50 years, deemed too dangerous after a series of unexplained accidents and worker disappearances. Locals whispered about curses, about something that ate men's hope, feeding on their despair. I, a cynical ex-military man, scoffed at such superstitions. My duty was to keep trespassers out, especially the urban explorers who loved forgotten places. I patrolled the fence lines, repaired broken gates, and kept the few remaining cabins from crumbling. It was a life of quiet solitude, a carefully built wall against the world. But that wall was about to crack, and the whispers from the hollow were about to become horrifying screams. If you're watching this, subscribe, like, and let me know where you're watching from. It was late spring when my fragile peace shattered, arriving in the form of my 8-year-old niece, Lily. Her parents, my sister and brother-in-law, were called away urgently for a family crisis out of state, leaving me, the gruff, solitary uncle, as her only option. I was terrible with kids, especially one as bright and relentlessly curious as Lily. Her bright pink backpack and wide, innocent eyes felt completely out of place against the quarry's gray, forbidding backdrop. She was full of questions, her small voice echoing unnaturally against the rock faces. "Why don't the cranes work anymore, Uncle Mark? Why is that water so dark? Are there monsters here?" I tried to brush her off, to distract her with stories of harmless wildlife, but her eyes kept drifting towards the deepest, most shadowed parts of the quarry. She possessed an unsettling intuition, a way of looking at things that made me uneasy. It was a strange feeling, as if she could see the same things my grandfather claimed to have seen, an echo of a sensitivity I thought had died out with him. I felt a cold knot of dread form in my stomach, a premonition that her presence was about to awaken something ancient and terrible. The first few days were surprisingly calm. Lily explored the perimeter of my small, isolated cabin, drawing pictures of squirrels and strange, imagined creatures. I kept her away from the quarry's edge, telling her it was dangerous, which it genuinely was. But the silence of Granite Hollow had changed. It was no longer the peaceful quiet I craved. It was a watchful, heavy silence, broken only by the distant squawk of crows or the creaking of old timber. It was during one of those strangely quiet afternoons, as a thick, cold mist rolled in from the coast and enveloped the quarry, that I heard it first, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper on the wind, like a child calling a name. Not Lily's, but a soft, melodic tune that plucked at the edge of memory. It was my mother's lullaby, a forgotten melody I hadn't thought of in decades. I froze, my blood turning to ice as the sound seemed to swirl within the mist, beckoning, impossibly real. My cynical mind screamed imagination, but my gut screamed warning. The hollow wasn't just watching, it was listening, and it had learned how to sing a terrifying song just for me. I tried to shake off the unsettling whisper, blaming the wind and my own overactive imagination, a common side effect of solitude. But the lullaby lingered, a chilling echo in my mind. I kept Lily closer, never letting her out of my sight, but her bright curiosity seemed undimmed even by the creeping mist. She found a strange comfort in the fog, tracing patterns on the dewy cabin windows. It was later that evening, as the mist turned into a heavy, impenetrable blanket, that a new incident sharpened my dread. Lily had been playing with her favorite wooden toy soldier, a small, hand-painted figure that was never far from her side. We had been sitting by the fire, just inside the cabin, the soldier resting on the small table between us. I had looked away for only a moment to stoke the embers. When I looked back, the soldier was gone. Not knocked over, not hidden. It was simply absent. We searched everywhere, under the table, in the blankets, but it was nowhere to be found. A cold dread settled in my stomach. The door had been latched, the windows sealed. Nothing could have entered, nothing could have left. It was a deliberate, impossible disappearance, a subtle warning that something unseen had entered our fragile sanctuary. The missing toy soldier was no accident. It was a message, chillingly delivered, confirming that the entity wasn't merely observing, it was interacting, probing. My mind, trained in logic and combat, struggled to grasp the impossible. Lily was upset, her innocent joy momentarily dimmed by the loss of her cherished plaything, though she didn't seem to grasp the true horror of its disappearance. It was the next morning, the fog still thick and suffocating, when I found the toy. It wasn't hidden in the cabin, nor was it outside near the steps. It was placed carefully, almost ceremonially, at the very edge of the deepest, most treacherous quarry pit, teetering on a loose rock. Its tiny wooden hand was pointing down, into the black, still water, where the mist clung like a shroud. The air around it was thick with a new, sickening smell, a mix of damp earth, stagnant water, and a faint, cloying sweetness, like rotting hope. It was a grotesque invitation, a lure. It was an unmistakable message, chillingly clear. Come find it. Come find despair. The creature wasn't just a monster. It was a harvester of human misery, using Lily's innocence to draw me closer to its hunting ground. The placement of Lily's toy, a clear and deliberate act, shattered my remaining skepticism. This was no prank, no animal. This was intelligent, malevolent, and playing a dangerous game. My grandfather's warnings, once dismissed as ramblings, now echoed with terrifying clarity. I snatched the toy from the precipice, my hands trembling, and gripped Lily's hand tighter, a desperate attempt to protect her from the unseen. It was then I heard it again, clearer this time. A child's laughter, light and innocent, yet utterly out of place. It was Lily's giggle, but it wasn't coming from beside me. It was echoing from the depths of the quarry pit, seeming to swirl up from the black water, beckoning. Lily tugged at my hand, her eyes wide, a strange pull on her small face. "Uncle Mark, did you hear that? Someone's playing!" It was a horrifying siren's call, using her own voice to lure her towards danger. It wasn't just mimicking my mother's lullaby. It was weaponizing Lily's own essence, turning her innocent joy into a tool of despair. The creature wasn't just after me. It was after my vulnerability, after the purest innocence I had sworn to protect. The sound of Lily's echoed laughter, a chilling mockery from the pit, sent a cold dread through me. I snatched her back, pulling her away from the edge, my heart hammering against my ribs. Her small face was confused, then fearful, as she sensed my raw terror. I dragged her back to the cabin, locking every door, sealing every window. But the true threat was inside, in her mind, in my memories. It was later that night, as Lily slept fitfully, that I finally unlocked the old, dust-covered chest in the back of my grandfather's closet. It was something he had told me never to touch, a forbidden legacy. Inside, nestled among old, yellowed maps of the quarry, rusty mining tools, and a strange, heavy iron stake, were dozens of meticulously kept journals. His journals. They detailed sightings, strange occurrences, and horrifying accidents dating back to the quarry's earliest days. He described a creature he called the Whisperer, a being that fed on despair, that lured its victims with stolen voices and manipulated their deepest sorrows.
It was a horrifying confirmation of everything he had tried to tell me, a chilling testament to my family's secret, brutal duty as the Iron Keepers of Granite Hollow. My grandfather's journals were a chilling chronicle of terror, a secret history spanning generations. His cramped handwriting detailed not just sightings, but the psychological warfare waged by the Whisperer. He wrote of its methods, the mimicry of loved ones' voices, the manipulation of despair, the way it used the quarry's tragic past as its hunting ground. The names of lost workers, family members, even children filled the pages, each entry a testament to the creature's insatiable hunger for sorrow. He described the creature itself in stark, terrified detail. A tall, gaunt figure, unnaturally thin, with long, grasping limbs and a head that seemed to shift in the periphery, never quite clear. But he always emphasized its eyes, pools of ancient hunger, reflecting not light, but the deepest, darkest corners of a victim's soul. It was a Wendigo, he'd finally named it in a later entry, using an old Native American term for a malevolent spirit that consumed humans, feeding on their despair. He believed it had been awakened by the quarry's initial construction, drawing energy from the misery of forced labor and tragic accidents. It was a terrifying legacy, one I had inherited, and its shadow now fell over Lily's innocent face as she slept. The journals cemented my understanding. This wasn't a random monster. It was a deeply malicious entity inextricably linked to Granite Hollow's tragic past. My grandfather's words, his warnings, now formed a terrifying blueprint of our enemy. But as I read, a new dread began to seep into my bones. The Whisperer wasn't just a physical threat. It was a psychological predator, using voices and memories as its most potent weapons. It was just past midnight, the cabin silent, save for Lily's soft breathing, that I heard it again, my mother's lullaby. But this time, it wasn't a faint whisper. It was clear, melodic, coming from just outside the window, as if someone stood directly beneath it singing softly. The glass was cold against my palm. I knew, with a horrifying certainty, that no one was out there. It was the Whisperer, calling to me, playing its cruel game. It was trying to draw me out, to break my resolve, to harvest my fear and despair. Its intelligence was undeniable, its malice absolute. I clutched the heavy iron stake from the chest, its cold metal a stark contrast to the terror in my heart. My grandfather's words echoed, "It knows your weaknesses. It knows your sorrow."
The phantom footsteps circling the cabin were a constant, chilling reminder of our entrapment. I pressed myself against the wall, peering through a crack in the curtains, but saw nothing but impenetrable fog and shifting shadows. The air inside felt heavy, suffocating, thick with the stench of stagnant water and that cloying, rotten sweetness from the quarry. Lily was now awake, her small hand clutching mine, her eyes wide with a silent, profound fear. It was then I heard it, a new voice, faint but clear, rising from the fog-shrouded darkness outside. It was my father's voice, pleading, filled with a deep, sorrowful regret. "Mark, please, you have to help me." My father had died years ago, a distant casualty of my own past. But the voice, the tone, the very specific regret was undeniably his. It was a horrific manipulation, the Whisperer weaponizing my deepest grief, trying to draw me out into the mist. It wasn't just a memory, it was a desperate plea from my heart used against me. I squeezed Lily's hand, fighting the urge to run, to answer, to somehow save the ghost the monster conjured. The Whisperer had found my ultimate weakness, my unresolved sorrow, and it was twisting it into a terrifying, irresistible lure. The Whisperer's use of my father's voice was a brutal, direct assault on my soul. Every fiber of my being screamed to answer, to rush out into the fog and confront the impossible apparition. My eyes stung, blurring with tears, but Lily's small, trembling hand in mine was my anchor, my reason to fight.
I closed my eyes, forcing myself to remember my grandfather's words. It feeds on your despair. Don't give it what it wants. I gripped the iron stake so tightly my knuckles turned white, its cold, heavy metal a reminder of my true purpose. I would not succumb to its psychological warfare. I would not let it harvest my grief. This wasn't my father. This was a manipulative monster trying to break me. The voice continued to plead, to whisper impossible regrets, but I stood firm, my resolve hardening like granite. I was an iron keeper, whether I wanted to or not, and my duty was to protect the innocent. My fear was still a living thing inside me, but it was now tempered by a cold, unyielding will. The whisperer could try to break my mind, but it would not break my spirit, not while Lily needed me. As dawn approached, the pleas of my phantom father finally faded, swallowed by the still thick fog, leaving behind a chilling silence. The whisperer's psychological assault had failed, but it had revealed its profound understanding of my deepest wounds. Lily, exhausted by fear, had finally fallen back asleep, clinging to me. I felt a surge of grim determination. I couldn't stay trapped in the cabin. I had to confront it on its ground, in the quarry. It was after securing Lily safely in the cabin, barricading the door and windows as best I could, that I stepped out into the mist. The air was heavy, charged with an unspoken malice. The first place I went was the quarry pit where Lily's toy had been found. The mist clung to the sheer rock faces, turning the hollow into a vast, echoing chamber. It was then I understood. This entire quarry was its whispering gallery, a place where it could project voices, amplify despair, and lure its victims. I moved cautiously, the iron stake gripped tight, every sense alert, knowing I was entering its hunting ground, where every echo could be a lie, every shadow a trap. I was going to fight fire with iron and silence its desperate harvest. I moved through the quarry like a ghost, the iron stake a grim extension of my arm. The mist muffled all sounds, distorting distances, turning familiar rock formations into monstrous shapes. My senses, sharpened by years of combat, screamed at me to be cautious, to trust nothing. The whisperer's presence was palpable, a chilling cold that clung to the very air, a sense of malevolent eyes watching my every move from the impenetrable fog. It was deep in the abandoned foreman's office, a dilapidated shack perched precariously near the edge of a flooded shaft, that I found it. Hidden beneath a pile of moldering paperwork, carefully preserved, was a small, ornate wooden box. Inside, nestled on a faded velvet lining, was a single, tarnished brass locket. It was Marcy's locket. My grandfather's journal had mentioned it, a young girl lost to the hollow decades ago, her despair a feast for the creature. The locket pulsed with a faint, unsettling energy, a cold dread emanating from it. It was a relic, a trophy, a concentration of pure misery that the whisperer had kept as a morbid souvenir. It was the physical manifestation of its insatiable hunger, a chilling reminder of its victims, and a clue to its terrible power. The discovery of Marcy's locket, a tangible piece of the whisperer's evil, filled me with a cold fury, hardening my resolve. This wasn't just a monster, it was a collector of sorrows, a thief of hope. I gripped the locket, feeling its unsettling coldness, knowing I held a key to its insidious nature. But as I stood there, an indelible truth settled over me. I was not alone. It was the sudden overwhelming stench of stagnant water, decay, and that cloying sweetness, now sickeningly potent, that assaulted my senses. The air grew heavy, thick, and suffocating, as if something immense had just entered the small, dilapidated office. A low, wet rasping sound echoed from the far corner, a sound of lungs working through something dense, something raw. It was the whisperer, vast and unseen, just beyond my sight, savoring the moment. It wasn't an ambush. It was a deliberate reveal, a psychological taunt. It was letting me know it was here, in its territory, playing its game with its chosen prey. My grandfather's words echoed, "It loves to play, it loves to break you." The hunter had become the hunted, and the game had just entered its final terrifying phase.
The Whisperer's presence, immense and unseen, filled the foreman's office, its foul stench burning my nostrils, its wet rasping breath echoing off the rotten walls. I spun, the iron stake held ready, my eyes frantically scanning the gloom, but saw nothing. Just shifting shadows and the oppressive, malevolent cold. It was here, undeniably here, but it wasn't lunging. It was waiting, reveling in my terror. It was the chilling realization that struck me then. The building wasn't just old, it was designed for containment. The thick rusting rebar in the windows, the heavy steel door, the very structure itself felt like a cage, and I was trapped within it. The Whisperer's presence intensified, pressing in from all sides, a palpable weight. Then a new sound, a low guttural murmur, a deep resonant hum that seemed to vibrate from the very floor, speaking in no language I knew, yet conveying pure, intelligent malice. It was a wordless communication, a declaration of its dominion. It had lured me into its iron cage, and now it was going to savor my fear, preparing me for the harvest. The wordless guttural hum of the Whisperer vibrated through the very structure of the old office, filling me with a profound, bone-deep dread. My muscles tensed, ready for an attack that never came. It was still unseen, a phantom of pure malevolence, its foul scent overwhelming my senses. I knew with a chilling certainty that it was close, studying me, savoring my fear. It was then I felt it, a piercing, soul-shattering cold, not of the air, but of an intense, unblinking gaze that felt like a physical weight. It was the Whisperer's eyes, fixed on me, though still hidden in the gloom. They weren't glowing red like the Dogman of other tales. These were described in Grandpa's journals as pools of ancient hunger, reflecting the despair it sought. This was the Wendigo's gaze, stripping away every defense, every shred of my humanity, leaving me utterly vulnerable. I stood there, paralyzed, the iron stake suddenly feeling like a feather. It wasn't just seeing me, it was seeing into me, cataloging my grief, my regrets, my deepest fears, preparing its final, most potent lure. The Wendigo's unseen gaze, a chilling weight that pierced my soul, felt like an eternity. It knew my deepest fears, my profoundest sorrows. I fought to breathe, to move, but I was rooted to the spot, utterly defenseless against its psychological assault. The heavy brass locket, still clutched in my hand, pulsed with an unsettling coldness, a morbid mirror to my own despair. It was then it began, a symphony of stolen voices rising from the shadows around me. My mother's lullaby, clearer and more heartbreaking than ever before. My father's sorrowful pleas echoing his last regrets. And then the most terrifying sound of all. Lily's innocent giggle, intertwined with her frantic cries for help coming from just outside the office. "Uncle Mark! Uncle Mark, come find me!" It was the Whisperer's final, most potent lure, a horrifying cacophony of my past and present fears, all converging to shatter my will. It wanted me to run, to rush out blindly into the fog, to make myself an easy target, to provide the ultimate harvest of despair. The Whisperer's symphony of stolen voices, the desperate cries of my phantom loved ones reached a crescendo, threatening to shatter my mind. Every instinct screamed at me to surrender, to rush to Lily's aid, but my grandfather's words echoed, "It feeds on despair. Don't give it what it wants." I squeezed Marcy's locket, its coldness a sudden spark of defiance. This was a lie. This was its trap. With a guttural roar that ripped through my own fear, I lunged, not towards the voices, but towards the source of the overwhelming stench, towards the palpable weight of its presence. My iron stake, heavy and true, became an extension of my rage and my inherited duty. I swung it with all my strength, not at a shadow or a voice, but at the chilling cold, at the center of the oppressive force that permeated the room.
The impact was sickening, a dull thud, followed by a wet, tearing sound and a sudden high-pitched shriek, neither human nor animal, that tore through the air, piercing the cacophony of false voices. It was real. I had hit it. The whisperer recoiled, its presence momentarily faltering, and the stolen voices dissolved into silence. My strike with the iron stake had connected, drawing a shriek of pure, unnatural agony from the whisperer. The symphony of stolen voices vanished, replaced by a profound, ringing silence that was almost as terrifying as the noise. The oppressive cold in the room receded, replaced by a rush of frigid, damp air as the creature recoiled, its vast presence suddenly less potent. I stood panting, the iron stake dripping with a dark, viscous fluid that smelled of stagnant water and something metallic. It was then I caught a fleeting glimpse, not of its full form, but a massive, gaunt limb, unnaturally long and covered in matted, slick fur, disappearing into the heavy mist outside the window. It moved with a sickening, jerky motion, a clear sign of injury. The air around the window where it had vanished pulsed with a strange, dark energy, a lingering malevolence. It had taken a hit, a serious wound, but it was not dead. It was retreating, bleeding, but alive, vanishing back into the endless fog of Granite Hollow. My grandfather's journals warned that its wounds healed slowly, but its hunger never died. I had won this battle, but the war, the generational war of the keepers, was far from the over.
Still lurked, deep within the hollow. The whisperer had retreated, leaving behind a profound silence and a cabin thick with the lingering stench of its presence. My heart hammered, adrenaline still surging, but a grim satisfaction settled over me. I had struck it, defended my niece, and honored my grandfather's legacy. I rushed to Lily, pulling her into a tight embrace, burying my face in her hair, feeling the precious warmth of her small, innocent body. She was safe, for now. But the hollow was not. The unique, sickening smell of stagnant water, decay, and rotting sweetness clung to my clothes, to the air, to the very wood of the cabin. It was a haunting reminder of the creature's proximity, a chilling brand it left behind. I knew, from the journals, that this scent would linger, a phantom presence that marked its territory and its chosen prey. It was a constant, low-grade torment, a psychological fingerprint of its malevolence. Even though it was gone, I could still feel its cold, ancient eyes watching from the depths of Granite Hollow, patiently waiting, assessing, its unseen wound a promise of a terrifying return. The next morning, the fog had finally lifted, revealing a world that seemed unnaturally bright and silent. Lily, blessedly, seemed to remember little of the night's horrors, attributing her fear to a bad dream. I didn't correct her. She was too young to carry the weight of Granite Hollow's secrets, too innocent for the curse of the Iron Keepers. I packed her bag, making hurried arrangements for her to stay with other family far away from the quarry. She needed to be safe, truly safe, from this generational shadow. But as I watched her drive away, her small hand waving goodbye, a profound, inescapable solitude settled over me. I was alone again, but not the same kind of alone. This was the solitude of the sentinel, the quiet burden of the keeper. My grandfather's journals, filled with decades of unseen battles and untold sacrifices, now lay open on my table, a blueprint for my new, unwanted destiny. The quarry, once a refuge, was now my prison, its looming rock faces and flooded pits a constant reminder of the ancient evil I was sworn to contain. The truth was a heavy chain, binding me to this desolate place, a silent promise to a monster I had wounded but not vanquished.
Days turned to weeks. The immediate threat was gone, but the presence of the Whisperer was a constant, gnawing certainty. I patrolled the quarry, not just for trespassers, but for any sign of its return, any new tracks, any desecrated wildlife. My old military training, honed for combat against human enemies, was now fully engaged in a solitary, desperate war against an ancient, otherworldly predator. I was always armed, always alert, the iron stake never far from my grasp. It was during one of my patrols, as dusk settled over the hollow, that I noticed it. Marcy's locket, which I still carried, began to glow faintly with a sickly greenish light. It wasn't my imagination. The tarnished brass pulsed with a cold, unsettling energy, almost imperceptible, but undeniably there. My grandfather's journals had warned of this. The relics of their victims, infused with their despair, sometimes reacted to its proximity, acting as a grim compass to its dark presence. The glow was faint, barely visible, but it was enough. It pointed towards the deepest, most shadowed part of the quarry, near the old, flooded main shaft, its true lair. The Whisperer was still here, healing, waiting, and the locket was a terrifying confirmation of its enduring hunger. The locket's eerie glow pointing towards the quarry's dark heart was an undeniable summons. The Whisperer was still here, slowly recovering, its presence subtly strengthening. My old life, my cynical detachment, felt like a distant dream. I was Mark Thorne, Iron Keeper of Granite Hollow, the latest in a long line of silent guardians. My family's burden was now mine, a legacy of sacrifice passed down through generations. I stood at the edge of the deepest pit, the locket throbbing coldly in my hand, the iron stake heavy and reassuring. The air was thick with the familiar sickening stench, now almost overpowering. This was it. This was where the Whisperer rested, where it drew its strength from the raw despair of the hollow's tragic past. I spoke aloud, my voice echoing against the sheer rock faces, a vow made to the empty air. I am the Keeper, and I will not let you hurt anyone else. It was a promise to my grandfather, to Marcy, to Lily, and to all the forgotten souls who had become the Whisperer's feast. I would not run. I would not break. My fear was still present, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by a grim, unyielding determination. The battle for Granite Hollow, for the future of the innocent, was about to begin. The battle was brutal, a terrifying blur of shadow and iron, of piercing shrieks and guttural roars echoing through the hollow. The Whisperer was immense, gaunt and impossibly fast, its long limbs blurring through the mist, its eyes burning with ancient hunger. But I was ready. My grandfather's journals were my guide, his iron stake my weapon, and Lily's innocent face my shield against despair. I fought with the fury of a protector, striking at its spectral form whenever it coalesced, pushing it back, driving it deeper into the quarry's haunted depths. It eventually retreated, wounded and diminished, but not destroyed. It was a victory, but a temporary one. I stood panting, scarred but alive, the iron stake now a permanent part of my grip. The Whisperer would heal. It would wait. It would return. And I, Mark Thorne, the Iron Keeper, would be waiting too. The silence of Granite Hollow was now my eternal vigil. The faint, sickening stench a constant reminder of my duty.
The quarry was my prison, my battlefield, and my legacy. I had accepted the burden. For the innocent, for my family, for the silent, unseen war that would continue until my last breath. My new life had begun, defined by the whispers in the mist and the ancient hunger